All right, I'm gonna, as you guys know, I'm Superintendent Brenham ISD. We went through the process last spring, most of last year, to propose a bond that was unsuccessful in May. We went back to a bond planning committee and said, what would you like us to do? And their response was, the problem is not going away. So let's see if we can repackage it, get some feedback, and put it out again. So that's where we are today. So I'm going to go through a couple of things that to get you to where we are as far as the repackaging of the bond stuff. One of the things that I always want to make sure I point out, I take this kind of a sidestep opportunity because school safety is such a hot topic right now. We had Jay Hufty about a month and a half ago, our Director of Safety and Security was phenomenal, come and talk about school safety. Since that point, our school board has allocated $1.4 million to bring our facilities up to where they need to be. The original bond that was not successful in May had $1 million, just under $1 million allocated for school safety. And we felt like this is something we need to pull out of any kind of bond package because it's too important for us to wait to see if the funds are allocated from a bond. So those funds will go for perimeter fencing. You might see some going up at different campuses. I think our next one we'll hit is Brenda Middle School. Again, the challenge is we don't want it to look like a prison, but at the same point, we need to make sure there's some type of a barrier, even if it's a 4-foot fence, that our kids, as much as our adults, can recognize that person should not be on this side of that barrier, right? So that's how we're approaching that. It's not fences with razor wire and stuff. And then the next thing is trying to remove the human factor on our exterior doors, and in which we were trying to put key cards. I don't have my badge on me, but where a badge will let you in on the exterior door. So the person over time, sadly, when Uvalde dies down a little bit, it doesn't get as much press. Human nature is just run into my car real quick. I'm going to prop the door and I'll run back in. And that can be a problem. So if we can get key card mechanisms on our exterior doors, that sometimes can at least decrease the opportunity for someone propping that door. So we have that. That one's going to be a little bit, lead time on those is almost 9 months. So because of supply chain. And then our interior doors will replace all of, and this is the bulk cost on the 1.4. All of the interior doors have to remain locked. And again, to overcome the human factor of that is you put in new mechanisms and handles on the exterior handle of the door where it can unlock with a key, but it never actually unlocks. So if I want to get in from the outside, from the hallway into the classroom, I pull my key out, I unlock it, and then I go in. When it shuts, the handle is always locked. So again, it removes that factor of I unlocked it and forgot to lock it back or any of that stuff. So statistics will show there has not been one active shooter who has breached a locked door, right? So a lot of conversations on how we approach that. And then also in addition to that, our regular budget includes almost $800,000 worth of school resource officers to be at our campuses all the time. So a large commitment from the district and from our Brenham PD, our sheriff's office, and different entities around to make sure we have officers, an armed officer at our campus, every one of our campuses every day. So I wanted to give a little side note on that. So let's talk taxes for just a minute, because when we talk bond, really we jump very quickly to, well, how much it's going to cost? What's it going to cost us and what's the impact? So I want to go briefly, kind of a 30,000-foot view on how schools are funded. And this, again, is a part of a conversation I had with you guys last year when we did this. Schools have two different pockets of money, right? Just like we do at home, we have our savings and then we have our day-to-day checkbook. Well, a school has what we call our maintenance and operations. Maintenance and operations is our day-to-day checkbook. It's what we pay our utilities, our supplies, transportation costs, but it's also what we pay our teacher salaries out of. 81% of our maintenance and operation budget goes to pay for salaries. So when we give a raise, and we have the last 2 years collectively, I don't want to use that. Last year we gave a 4% increase. This year we gave a 5% increase. So 9% increase for all of our staff salaries. When we do that, that cuts into more of that leftover 19%. We add on to that bus transportation, and now you're almost about only 12% left. That is the actual day-to-day of utilities and different things like that. The 85 cents over time, and I'll show you this in just a minute, is at a compressed rate. The state says this is the most that you can tax without having an election to ask if we can tax on the M&O side. This is the least that you can tax. So we are basically set with that tax rate. I'll go over that in just a minute, a little bit more. The other side of that is our interest in sinking. This is like your mortgage. Certain things the state says is you can go out and ask the taxpayers basically for a loan or in the form of a bond. You can do that for school buses because collectively they cost a lot of money, Wi-Fi and technology, renovation and building. If a district were going to try to save money to build a school and say that school is $100 million, that savings each year would come out of your M&O side. You would never get to that $100 million to be able to save to build a school. No different than if you were going to say, we're not building a house until we can pay cash for the whole thing. You may get there eventually, but it's going to take you a long time. So the M&O and the INS collectively added together is our total tax rate based on $100 value per house. In Brenham, what does that look like compared to other districts? So these are some districts who are similar in size to us. And I'll go to a next slide that has districts that are closer to us. If we look at the tax rate difference all the way from Livingston's, that is $1.31, down to ours, the lowest in the area. The next slide shows us some schools we're more familiar with. The difference is not the M&O, maybe with a little bit of penny here and there, but the difference is on the INS side and the community's commitment to making sure the facilities, the buses and stuff that the students participate in and work in every day are up to code, up to par. The environment in which they're being educated is a good, healthy, safe one. So that's the difference. I always get the question of our taxes are continually going up. So I wanted to show this slide. If we think all the way back, you guys have been around for a little while. We go back to 2005. Property taxes for school districts at that time were $1.62 in Brenham. Legislation was passed that caused us to have to cut that down over a 2-year period. And the state said they would offset that cost. They did to an extent, but not completely. It really caused districts to tighten their belt quite a bit with their spending. We look all the way to 2018. In the last 6 years, taxes for BISD have gone down almost 20 cents in the last 6 years. Okay. Expenses, though, continue to climb. Now, people will say the yield per penny, because the value goes up, offsets that. Right. When our appraisal district comes and appraises your houses and your values go up, as we've seen this last time, they've gone up tremendously. It's a fallacy to say that money stays right here from a school district standpoint. When the appraisal district assesses an appraisal value, then we start collecting those taxes. And I'm going to simplify a very complicated process. But to simplify, that money in essence goes to Austin. It doesn't come to us at the district. And then Austin pays us back on what's called a basic allotment. We get $6,160 per student that is in the chair every day, not on the enrollment, but actually in attendance. Now, we give some weighted funding for students that have particular learning needs or in particular programs. If we have a special needs student, then you get a 1.2 weighted funding. So you get a little bit more because the state recognizes it costs a little bit more to educate those students. If you're in a career and tech class, that is a principal's level class, which is typically a freshman or 8th grade level class, you get a little bit more funding. And as you go to more of an advanced class in your career and tech ed, we get a little bit more funding because the tools in which those students are working with gets a little bit more expensive. If you have an ESL student or bilingual student, you get a little bit more weighting. So we call that our weighted average daily attendance. That's what we get paid on. We don't get paid on if our property values go up, we get more money. It's not the case, okay? In fact, if property values go up enough, you become what's called a property wealthy school district. You start leaving more money out of your M&O side back to the state. We're what's considered a gap district, not quite property wealthy yet, but we're getting very, very close, okay? Any questions on tax stuff before I move on? Because that's a lot of information really quick. The main thing I need people to understand, because it's the misconception I just pointed out, that we get paid based on all these values going up. And that is not the case. We get paid based on little Johnny sitting in his chair every day. That's how we get paid. They have not raised the allotment in a while. There's always talk about raising the allotment, right? And there's always talk about adjusting the weights on the allotment. For an example, GT, they adjusted the weight on the GT student allotment or weight for a little bit 4 years ago. So there's always adjustments, but the adjustments never quite keep up with the inflation costs and the cost of expenditures and stuff. All right, I very rarely can I do a presentation without pointing out the fact that Brenham ISD is the oldest school district and first school district in the state of Texas. September 6, 1875, right downtown here in 3 churches, was the first day of publicly funded school in the state of Texas. I always throw this in there too, because this is unique to Brenham. The same time over at Camptown. There's where Camptown is, where the Pickard School will be. The first school for African-American kids publicly funded in the state of Texas also started. That is very unique. At the same time they saw the value of educating the white students, they saw the value of educating African-American students over at Camptown. Last bond was passed in 2012 to build Alton Elementary and part of renovating the middle school, which is the library area and the cafeteria. We have our junior high campus. I'm going to make sure I say this correctly, because I offended some people last spring when I said this campus was built as a bomb shelter. So let me rephrase it and say this campus was built as a high school to be used as a bomb shelter for the community. And I factually say that because federal funds helped pay for that as a bomb shelter during the Cold War, right? So I made sure I said that correctly. It was built as a school to be used in the community as a bomb shelter. I say that if you've not been in, raise your hand if you went to school there or been in the junior high, okay? So if we look at modern buildings with the importance of natural light that we know, that main structure has no windows. The only windows it has are the ones where we call the snack bar, which is almost below grade anyway. So you're looking at concrete as the road rises up, right? The biggest problem, there's a lot of big problems we have with the building right now, but our biggest one in the environment we're in right now is the fact that our kids, every time they change periods, most of them have to go from that main building to the science building, which is about 50 yards away. Or they go outside to go to the math building, or they go outside that's almost 75 yards away to go to the band hall, or they go to what we call the rubber gym, which is the PE gym that we do a lot of stuff in. So they leave the safety of the main building to go outside, okay? Now, under new governor's orders, all of those exterior doors have to remain closed and locked at all times. Even though it's inside a fence, they have to remain locked all the time to try and protect the safety of those students who are transitioning back and forth. So in between every passing period, we have teachers that come out, have to hold those doors open, let those kids in, passing period ends, those doors close and kids go back in the classroom. So from a safety standpoint, I'm going to talk about the weather and all that. When it's raining, I still got to get to that band hall that's 75 yards away when it's pouring down rain. Now, we do a good job of accommodating and saying, we understand it's pouring rain. If it's like coming down buckets, wait just a second. We're not going to count you tardy. We're not horrible people. But at the same time, it's not a great environment, okay? Next thing, growing demand for career in tech, and I'll talk more on that in just a minute, and increased growth of enrollment. One of the things I want to talk about is partially why we need this is we did a demographic study last summer to see what is the growth of Brenham ISD in Washington County over the course of the next 10 years. And we landed with about a 1.3 to 1.9% annual growth. Over 10 years, that equates to about 900 students. That is not much. That is easily manageable if we're starting in the right place and we have the mindset that we can build houses a lot faster than we can build schools. Where we're sitting right now, though, is not at a point where we can easily manage that. Our Early Childhood Learning Center that's right over here by where Pickard School was on Chapel Hill. This summer, we moved 4 portables from different locations in the district because we didn't want to buy brand new portables that are $600,000 a piece. Move 4 portables there so that we can have classrooms, because those classrooms are already full with our 4-year-olds. And when I say full, I'm talking 1 teacher to 18 4-year-olds. Okay. We don't have any more space. So by the end of the year, they will be at 1 teacher to 22. And we have applications out right now for people to come be paraprofessionals in those rooms. It's just hard to find people. So that we can at least have 2 adults within that classroom that has 18 to 22 4-year-olds in there. That building was not constructed for pre-K. If you know anybody that teaches pre-K, kindergarten, or even first grade at times, it's ideal to have a restroom in the classroom. So when Sally needs to go to the bathroom, you say, okay, Sally, go right there to the bathroom. Instead, what we have is we have classes that at certain times of the day, they go like a herd of ducks, as I call it, and they all waddle down to the bathroom. And I was there the other day for about 30 minutes in the morning, and all I did was stand on the wall while these 4-year-olds wait. Urinal comes open, jumps in, and goes out, washes his hands, and gets back in line, right? For about 30 minutes, we cycled the classes through there. The boys' side and the girls' side was doing the same thing. Well, they go to the bathroom more than 1 time a day. So how much instruction time is lost simply because for safety reasons, you can't just send a 4-year-old down the hallway to go to the bathroom. So anything that we do in the future needs to make sure we make a facility that has the ability to have our 4-year-olds and our 5-year-olds and potentially our 6-year-olds in a room that has a bathroom in there. So we've allocated for that. So for growth to take care of that building that we already have 4 portables with classrooms in, back at our last bond, a year ago this time, we were looking to say, how can we overcome that? One option was to build another building over there at the ECLC building. All right, we ran the costs on that. At that time, it was between $35 and $40 million to just simply add on to the ECLC building enough classrooms that would accommodate where we feel like we would be in 10 years. And that doesn't solve our problem at our other elementary schools. Alton Elementary is not a classroom open. Krause Elementary has a class that meets on the stage because the rest of the classrooms are full. And then Brenham Elementary has 2 rooms that are being utilized as offices that could be used as classrooms. Now, I say again, an opponent of my argument would say, yeah, but you only have 20 kids in those classrooms. The state says you can have 22. And really, you can get a waiver and get 26. But then we have to say, is that the learning environment we want our kids to work in, or to learn in? And is that the learning environment we want our teachers to teach in? 1 to 26, you can get physically in the room, yes. What is the quality of education going on? And again, that's where we are right now. We go project out 10 years, we're behind the curve, okay? So we wanted whatever solution to come up with it had to solve or at least address the overcrowded that is now and is coming at the elementary levels as well. So when we looked at different options, and I'll go over those in just a second, we had that in mind. I put myself a subnote here for transfer students because we've gotten a handful of messages on Facebook trying to help us out saying, if you're overcrowded, why are you accepting all these kids? So we have 106 transfer students right now in Brenham ISD, 57 of which are staff kids. Yes, you can bring your kid to Brenham if you work here. The other 47 are ones that we've allowed in because their grade level either has space, they don't have attendance problems, and they don't have discipline problems. As I denied a person on Tuesday because the discipline was trying to come here from Bryan High School. I said, you're not coming. We called the school, said, has Sally got any problems with discipline or attendance? Because we're not going to take that. We don't have to. The state doesn't say we have to. I denied a special needs student. This one hurt my heart, but I denied a special needs student in September because she needed speech therapy, and our speech therapists are overcrowded with trying to accommodate our kids, right? Turn down a special needs student, let yourself sleep good that night on that. But we have to live up to the commitment we made to our community to say, we're going to follow this criteria. So I say all that to say transfer students is not the reason we are growing. We are growing because we have all these housing developments around here and they're bringing kids to us. And that is a good thing. Okay. All right. Next thing, bond planning committee met last year and this year during the summertime to regroup to see what it is we might want to do. That committee met throughout August. Throughout the summertime, we conducted a survey. How many of you guys took the survey this summer? Thank you. I was going, man, please one hand go up at least. All right. Well, if you took the paper survey, the online survey, I appreciate it. If you lived through the telephone survey, bless you, because that thing was a monster. Okay. The survey and the committee conversations narrowed it down to 2 things they wanted to see. We want choices, and we should have known that the first time. Human nature is we want choices. So we split the bond into 2 different propositions or 2 different items. I'll go over in just a second. The next thing they said, try and bring the cost down a little bit. So we looked at the junior high that we proposed the first time and said, how can we squeeze the cost down? And we cut some square footage. When you're talking construction, really the only way to save cost is cut square footage, right? I mean, you can nickel and dime here and there with different surfaces and stuff, but it's pretty much square footage. But we didn't want to cut programs that would be opportunities for our kids when we cut down on some of that square footage. So we did both of those. August 9th, the bond planning committee made a recommendation to the board and the board approved it on the 15th. So what did they recommend? Junior high that has a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Now, I'm gonna back up and I'm gonna tell you transparency. When we did this bond planning the first time, so a year ago this time, we went through August, September, October, November, December, and I was dead set, not from me, but from the committee, that we were about to build a new high school. Because if we look 10 years out, a new high school would solve that, and everybody bumps the high school, build a new high school. But after you look at the logistics, the cost, the lack of 80 to 100 acres it takes to build a high school, that was not a realistic possibility. But that would have solved a lot of our long-term problems for Brenham. So they backed off that. And I say that to say the committee both times looked at every possible option. This is not something that someone came in and said, here's what we're doing. And we goes, yeah, let's do that. They looked at every possible option we could do. Okay. Where they settled was with a 6, 7, 8 junior high that would be built in the field between the current junior high and Cub Stadium. Why 6th grade? Why that grade configuration? In the United States, 70% of the schools, quote, middle schools are a 6, 7, 8 combination. Okay. The other 20% is a 7, 8, 9 configuration, which I've never heard of in Texas, but evidently the rest of America might have that. Only about 10% of the schools in the United States have a only 7, 8 configuration. The reason for that is options for electives and stuff, academically and developmentally appropriate stuff. For example, we have band and choir that goes down to the middle school to help our 6th graders get introduced and get rolling with band. If they're in the 6, 7, 8 building, they have opportunities to take all the electives that are already in place with teachers already hired for our 7th and 8th graders. STEAM can grow into more of an engineering program as opposed to just the STEAM, the hands-on stuff. So we can expand a lot of stuff with 6th graders up there. 6th grade, when you transition from a 5, 6 campus like we have here, and I was a principal at a 5, 6 campus, and it's a good model, but when those 6th graders go into 7th grade, it is a culture shock because 5th grade is an elementary mentality. 6th grade typically is a secondary mentality, right? Even division by certifications of teachers. So oftentimes those 6th graders are treated very much like elementary students. And then when they walk into a 7th grade setting, they're not treated like elementary kids anymore. It's a culture shock to them, all right? Plus add on the fact that if we pull 6th grade up, that helps us with our enrollment growth over the next 10 years. It helps it if we then take our 3 elementaries, Alton, Brenham Elementary, Crosby Elementary, and make those into pre-K through 5th grade campuses, and take our current middle school and make it also a pre-K through 5th grade campus. Now, how is that developmentally good? Let me tell you a couple of things. Academically, again, I've been a principal at that type of a structure. You take a 4th grader who struggles in reading, and you put them with a kindergartner or a 1st grader who's learning to read. Now that 4th or 5th grader is a rock star. Their confidence goes up, and their willingness to want to learn and read more goes through the roof. And this little guy's now got a buddy. The argument against it is, what about you have a kindergartner sitting at the cafeteria table with a 5th grader? No, you have to administrator it, right? You have to do that. But also, research shows that the number of times a student transitions from one campus to the next campus, each time there's a lag of, I thought it was only 3 or 4 months. It's actually almost close to 6 or 7 months of learning before they refamiliarize themselves with the environment, the teachers, the structure, simple things like how does the cafeteria line go? Okay. So we take our students' current structure. If we start at ECLC, we go at ECLC to one of our elementaries, to the middle school, to the junior high, to the high school. 5 transitions, right? For you parents, there's 5 different schools you drop off at. Just pointing that out, all right? And by doing this structure, we go to 4 elementary schools, we go to 1 junior high, we go to 1 high school. Now we're cutting that down to 3. 3 transitions. There's a lot less time that they have to have that learning lag that comes about, okay? ECLC would go away from the standpoint of being a campus that services kids as we know it now. I've gotten the question quite a few times, what would happen to that building? Well, that building, we are in desperate need of a lot of space for a lot of reasons. So we would utilize that space for something. Our Head Start program that we are just a part of, it's not our program, but we're a part of and work with, their building is not great. To reach out to them and say, here's some space that will probably be pretty good would be good. Lots of different opportunities there, but it would remain property for the district. $111 million is the all-in process or project cost. We got a lot of pushback last spring about, man, that's like $400 something a square foot. Yeah, that's what it costs. And they said, well, I can build a house for 200 something, or I can build this building for this much. Yes, you can. Do you have to have geotechnical samples of your soil before you even put a shovel in the dirt? Do you have to pass all of these codes? You have to have fire suppression. And then is your cost of building your house from the time that you put the shovel in the dirt to the time your wife picks out the spoon that's going to be in the drawer? Because this is an all-in cost from paying all the soft costs from the time the Geotech starts doing the soil samples to the time we put a pencil sharpener on the desk and kids walk in the door, covers the whole cost. So when you add up all those little tangibles, you very quickly get up to a cost that we are now being very transparent of. Yes, it costs this much money. It's not $111 million, but we're going to buy the computer somewhere else. It's not $111 million, but we're going to buy the teacher's desk somewhere else, or the student's desk somewhere else, or the cafeteria table somewhere else. It is an all-in cost, okay? One of the things that we did was identify efficiencies of the cost of the original building. They wanted a single facility. This is all under one roof, and potentially, if it were to pass in November, by the time it was designed, constructed, we could possibly move in August of 2025. I show this picture. One of the things that I've gotten in a lot of different times when I've worked with bonds is you want us to pay, in this case, $111 million. You can't even tell us what we're buying. And that's a legit question, right? So we went to the architects, of which we have not paid them a dime. And we said, we need some renderings of what this looks like. In fact, most of what we got all spring was, Burton showed us this. So why don't you show us what Burton showed us? And I said, because, and I gave him an explanation. And now I can say, because now Burton's getting a lot of heartburn from people because it doesn't look like they're rendering exactly, right? The rendering, it's yellow and you have it red, right? So I say that to say this is a conceptual rendering that we gave to our architects some information. We said, here's a picture of what Alton Elementary looks like, because that's Brenham. Here's a picture of what the Heritage Society Museum downtown looks like, because that's Brenham. Here's a picture of what Bluebell's offices look like, because that's Brenham. And they came back with this. Now they tried to get us to get this glass and mirrors and stuff everywhere. That's not Brenham, right? It needs to look and fit Brenham on the outside, but inside it needs to be state of the art, because that's the world all kids will graduate into the rest of the world has. So that's Proposition A. Proposition B is our Career and Tech Center. Up at the high school, we have a Career and Tech building that was built in the 1990s when that building was built. I'll give you guys some educational history. In the 1990s, No Child Left Behind, everybody goes to college, right? Is that a very good model that we went on for a while? Because not everybody goes to college. Not everybody needs to go to college. And what we see now is a very large gap in our skilled labor force. I was at a meeting yesterday at the Hody Center with the Hody Tech Advisory Committee. And it was people from the Hody Center with Blinn, the people from the Rellis campus over in Bryan that work with Blinn, and every one of them are saying the same thing. Their classes are full. They're full with either high school students, of which ours go to the Hody Center every day, or they're full of people who are coming from different industries, and the industry is sending them to school to get training, or they're people who don't have a job and want some training so they can get a job, because they were part of that generation that was the gap of skilled labor force. I say that to say the Hody Center is full. When we talk about sending kids to the Hody Center, I've had this argument, why don't we just use the Hody Center at Blinn? We are to the most extent we possibly can, and yet our classes are still full. The building at the high school was built during that philosophy of No Child Left Behind. Everybody goes to college, so the labs are not built like they need to be for the number of students who now cycle through them. 654 additional students last year started taking career and tech classes. We have some stats I got from the Brazos Valley Community of Governments, and it reinforces what we all know. If you get kids involved in something, they're going to want to come to school. If you get kids involved in something, there are going to be less discipline problems. If you get kids involved in something, they'll be more engaged in school. Well, this is a group of kids that they're not always athletes. They're not always in the band. They're not always cheerleaders. They are doing their thing, right? And so we need to provide opportunities for them to get them engaged in this process too. So if given the opportunity with the Career and Tech Center to expand that, that's Proposition B. That's a cost of $25 million. That renovates what we currently have to make those shops big enough, and it also adds on to it so we can add additional programs. Our culinary arts right now is inside the academic building. We have 2 teachers that teach that all day long. One of them is in what used to be a home ec building. The other one is a home ec classroom. The other one is just in a classroom, right? At no time do they touch a commercial stove. When they're cutting onions up, I use this example, when they're cutting onions up or they're frying something or something that causes some, where you normally turn on an exhaust fan, they raise the 3 windows up and they put circular fans in the windows of the bungee cord and they turn them on. That's a fact, right? Not making that up. All right, so that would move those kids into a facility that is built and designed for culinary arts, provide more opportunities for kids and it opens up that space inside the academic building for for more academic classes. Looking at different programs to add. Right now, and I think it's the next slide, through Brazos Valley Community of Government said the leading two occupations in Washington County are construction and maintenance. Okay. We know why that is. We have all these factories around here having a hard time trying to find HVAC people, plumbing, electricians. Those people right out of high school could go to work and making almost 6 figures. It's a little bit different than it was when I was in school. Okay. So that's our two propositions. Proposition A, $111 million. Did some research to make sure I was giving everybody the most equitable scenario here. So oddly enough, right now, the average price of a house in Brenham ISD, which is not just Brenham, but Washington County, is a little over $200,000. I don't know where those houses are, but that's a little over $200,000. So I don't know. Yeah. So we ran it on that since that's the average house. So it equates out to roughly, based on the numbers where we are now and this built-in inflation for rising costs of interest rates, but also the rising cost of property values, of which each penny would yield a little bit more. Prop A would potentially estimated cost of 15 cents increase in our tax rate for a total of about $20 a month. Prop B, 3.6 cents for a total cost by a month of 4.8. And those are estimations based on where the market looks to be trending by the time that these bonds would be sold. Okay. Always a reminder, if you're 65 and older on your homestead, and I misspoke and some people called me on it, but on your home, or I didn't clarify, on your homestead, 65 and over, your values and your taxes are frozen. So it does not impact you at all, but it drastically impacts your grandchildren. So in a good way. I have some literature up here. I was going to bring some voter registration cards, but I don't have those. But this is a side note from an ex-social studies teacher. If you don't vote, I'm preaching to the choir, I think. If you don't vote, you need to vote. It's the one time at younger audiences, I tell them it's the one time you actually make a difference. Your opinion on Facebook doesn't actually change policy in Washington, but this does. So exercise your right to vote. Deadline to register is October 11th. And then we can pick up some voter registration cards in a lot of different places. Early voting starts the 24th. Election day is the 8th. And I was watching the clock. I've got 6 minutes left for questions. So any questions on all that I went over extremely fast? Yes, sir.
Are y'all going to change your approach and how you market the information out? Because that seemed to be the problem last time. Not other people got the information. I know a lot of people never took the opportunity to go see how bad the junior high was. So
yeah.
Didn't know if there's a way to tell that better.
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about that, and you kind of hit it on the head. Last time we did a lot of stuff at the junior high, so they come see it. We still have a couple opportunities we'll advertise for that. The web page has been up. There's information there. It's how do we get people to go and look at it? And you know, Brooke Trahan is our communications person who is phenomenal. And so we've got a couple of different methodologies of which we can do that. A little bit more stuff on the radio, in the banner and different things like that. A little more signs. We've already got some signs up. Simply making awareness to the facts. As you guys know, and I get a little cynical when I talk about Facebook and some other modes like that, but sometimes a certain thing can be put on there and it runs like wildfire and has absolutely zero factual information to it. Whereas if they just went to the website, the facts are right there. So how we can market that is definitely something we're looking at so we get that stuff out there. So good question. Yes, sir. Not in the bond. That's some of the things that we took out. Now, one of the things that was in the original bond was the Title IX issues. The Title IX issue at the stadium, we purchased lockers and we spent about $300,000 to fix that. So, and I use the word fix loosely, we band-aided it. If this were to pass, we would still use locker rooms at the junior high, the new junior high, for the purposes we described back in the spring, that our opponents and our teams, both girls and boys, soccer, track, and all that, could use the junior high locker rooms in the evening that are used for junior high all day long. Efficiency of space. Cub Fieldhouse doesn't go away. We still utilize that and would continue to do that. So that issue, the Title IX issue, again, I don't know any other way to say it than we couldn't wait for the voters to help us fix that problem. We needed to fix it ourselves very quickly. So when we do that, we pull out a fund balance, comes out of that M&O side to fix those problems. Yes, sir.
Were you all able to pull components of the previous bond on this bond planning committee, and how did that?
Made for some interesting conversations. No, in all seriousness, it really was good. And we had some people that were there who were openly opposed to it and were good Facebook posters openly opposed to it, all right? And so we pulled them in and said, all right, at least be part of the process. You can still oppose us. We can still have difference of opinion. And many of those individuals, I don't necessarily agree with their tactics, but they came. And if you come and listen and you simply don't agree, we can part as friends. I can live with that. It's the people who don't know that then shoot out there and make stuff up. That's a problem. Educate yourself. If we disagree, we disagree. That's how the world works. Right.
I assume the impact of the current rates and rates going up is built into that?
Yes. Yeah. There's inflation numbers built in both the interest rate side and the construction cost side, both of those. Yes, sir.
I don't have a clear picture. What happens to the current junior?
So the current junior high would be demoed. It's not a building that has any potential to be saved at any kind of cost that is reasonable. So it would be demoed and it would actually become probably a practice field, because if we shift and put the new building where the practice fields are for our junior high, right next to the stadium, then you got to replace the practice fields for them for their different sports and stuff. So it would be that.
Save some money by previous people that went there to help you get up.
Hey, there you go. It's a big sledgehammer.
I know one of the things council yelled about is repairs and maintenance.
Mhm.
Theoretically, if it was possible to repair the junior high, what are we talking, $75 million?
Yeah. And construction, in the construction world, there's about a 65% threshold that if it's going to cost you 65% or more of the cost of building a new one, it's not worth renovating, and we far exceed that. And then at the end of the day, I go back again, it doesn't have any windows.
Yeah.
We all know that natural light is good for everybody. And I know I go nuts if I'm not in a room with natural light. And to come in and knock windows into a wall that is 2 foot thick concrete because it was built as a high school for a bomb shelter, then that becomes a problem. You got that. All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all very much. I have a little one pager that I'll give to you guys.